potential first pick if there's any really strong power pick open.
Well, they're going pretty quick, the bans are rather. The first one off the board is going to be Azir. We've seen a fair amount of that prioritized by Nukeduck. It was a little bit hit or miss. He had, a good game against Origin. It wasn't really the standout factor, but not so good in his previous game. Interesting to see that they chose that first, though.
Well, I think for Elements, they also want to see what ROCCAT is banning here, because you want to get into that situation where either you can just get a Rek'Sai Gragas and they don't get any tier 1 jungler, or you end up trading them. Elements here, banning the Jace. It was buffed. Yeah, I mean, I think on paper it looks very, very strong. The extra damage he gets at the last few ranks of especially Shock Blast, and now banned away against ROCCAT here. Both junglers, Rek'Sai Gragas, will be open. Sivir is also open, and once Kalista is banned, her value goes up. And is there anything else Elements really needs? No, and I like it. I like it.
So let's see if Elements can turn the tide here with that Sivir pickup. We'll see. We've yet to see what ROCCAT's going to answer with, but also on the bans too. There's some interesting prioritizations. The Jace was mostly a patch ban as well. The Rumble against Steve. I mean, on the other hand, banning away Froggen's Echo. You can see which teams are paying attention to what right now, and there we go. We've got ourselves what might possibly be a Cinderfish, and of course also the Rek'Sai, which should prompt the Gragas from Dexter's side.
Should be a Gragas from Dexter here. No real surprise, at least, if that gets locked in. But yeah, ROCCAT just standard, almost want to say like top tier bans. Okay, you take away Kalista, Rise, so on. And Echo has been, as we talked about, a very strong champion for Froggen in the mid lane, so their bans makes a lot of sense here. I would almost have preferred to see an Alistar come in as a pick, but they're probably afraid that Jwaow could also take away this Fizz. He played it last week, so they decided to say Alistar is not our top, well, we don't need the Alistar, we can go Nautilus as well for Vander, so instead we try and grab away these two carry picks.
Right, but there's a couple problems with that, right? First off, they could have done it with their other pick, because Rek'Sai, Gragas both open. Unless you're playing Gambit,
most teams will take the Rek'Sai over the Gragas. So I think for ROCCAT, that one is fair enough, but it does give the Alistar over to Elements.
That's my other point. Now you've got a Sivir Alistar lane to deal with. What is ROCCAT going to do against that?
A Sivir Alistar lane, well, you need some sort of wave clear if you want to take the 2v2 lane, because what ends up happening, if you have, let's say, if you have a lane with no wave clear against it, the Alistar Sivir will push you into your tower over and over because Sivir is so good at fast pushing, and then once Alistar hits level 6, you just call down your jungler, you tell your top lane, be ready to teleport, and Alistar just goes in, he starts to dive, pops his ulti, and you can very easily punish people for being stuck under their own tower. So ROCCAT instantly replying, saying we need Corki, and then just by having Corki, honestly, is enough to somewhat keep the waves away, at least once we start hitting level 6 and he can farm with rockets. I want to see what support gets locked in. Nautilus we have seen quite often for Vander if he can get onto the big tank, but another part coming in.
I mean, it worked last game to prevent the all-in dives down on the bottom side, so we'll see how that shakes up for Elements versus ROCCAT's duo lanes, if indeed we have the 2v2.
It's the same lane here, but we saw last game how the Corki Bard, they want to try and obviously have these quick trades with some fairly long-range poke, but also try and push the lane. They won't really be too easy against the Sivir. And also you have to be a little bit afraid of what Alistar can do in terms of setting up a gank for the enemy jungler. Yeah. But I'm really looking forward to see what's going to happen down this bottom lane, and if Elements can start playing around some proper wave clear from a Sivir.
Yeah, so they have that Sivir for that wave clear. We've also got a Vlad locked in here for Froggen. And Jwaow, I think we could probably see this one coming with the Ignite teleport. It's a HEcarim against this Cinderhulk Fizz. This is going to be an interesting top lane, I think.
Yeah, so if there's a summon advantage in the early game for Jwaow, that can be very important, because what you often look at here, when you have these two aggressive early junglers and Gragas, Rek'Sai, you got two top laners, bruisers, who want to fight each other, who wants to try and snowball. That one offensive summoner on the side of Elements can be the deciding factor in a 2v2 fight very early on in the game here. So we're gonna see more focus on the early game from Jwaow. Trendy Force Rush, you have that Ignite here, so you have some extra power. Steve is more looking for Cinderhulk and scale a bit more towards the late game, and that can be super important in terms of how they play it out. It does also mean for ROCCAT, if they do decide to lane swap, obviously having that smite for Steve is gonna make him a little bit stronger, and he should be able to pick up a little bit more extra farm. He can double jungle fairly effective as well.
So now the Lulu's locked in for Nukeduck's safe choice to lane against Froggen, who's had a little bit a bigger bit of impact than Elements as a whole. What is this ROCCAT lineup altogether looking to do though, Deficio?
Well, I feel like we have a bit the same style as Gambit, just not with the Italy pick, because once again, it's Bard, Corki, and Lulu. So you have this group together with great poke, great disengage, and you have a split pushing champion that can snowball out of control. So we're honestly seeing almost the same comp as what Gambit was running. Difference is Elements here, because they're also running the Gragas and the HEcarim top. They have a bit more punch in the early game to try and punish ROCCAT start if they want to do standard lanes. And I really want to see Dexter put some time in that top lane now. Use your Ignite HEcarim, get his Trinity Force. It is 5-11. There were a few changes. The home guard is not as effective, but he's still a fantastic, strong pick. It's more than just home guarding in and trying to one-shot an AD carry.
Yeah, we'll see if they're able to use it to its full effect this game. So for now, though, we are loading onto the riff. We want to know what you guys think about this game. Will Elements be able to snap the trend and turn it around for a win, or will ROCCAT come up with this one? Tweet at LOL Esports with your hashtags ELWin or ROCWin, and we'll see who does win as we get ready to start this one off. So, similar composition where ROCCAT as Gambit had. Elements looking to try and get the horse a-running. They'll have plenty of tools to do it as we get loaded up to start off the game, number 2, going into week 4 of this European LCS Summer Split.
Look at Steve here early on, starting a Dorn's Blade, and not the Flask we see from time to time. So he's ready to fight from the get-go. He might still be forced into a lane swap depending on what ROCCAT decides to do, or what Elements decide to do with their dual lanes. See PromisQ here in this Alistar. It was his best champion, honestly, coming into the LCS. He's always been one of his favorite champions. 100% win rate so far. Obviously insane KDA. He had a fantastic game against Gambit in week 1 on this Alistar here.
Yeah, stand-up performance that time is...
And this guy's been underperforming.
Yeah, he's had a lot of trouble in other things. We saw some replays that his Bard play really not on point all around the board. It's just a little bit of trouble. Let's see what happens here as Jankos goes a little far forward. He finds everyone from Elements. What will they spend to try and catch him? It looks like so far nothing. Couple wards go down. That's about it as Elements send everybody up. Look to try and scout out the lane swap. ROCCAT, Vander, and Steve are all hanging here. We might get a fight indeed. The crowd certainly wants it. They're chanting Steve's name. It's PromisQ, Froggen, and Dexter all hanging out in the brush. Tabzz soon to join them. Steve's going to back away here. Looks like we might have ROCCAT's duo lane up in the top side. Yeah,
you can see even the ward they placed at level 1. They were waiting in that bush as well. Getting ready to set up a potential freeze whenever the minions would arrive, and also spot if anyone from Elements were hiding in that bush here or showing himself near the tower. So Steve is going to head down towards the bottom lane. We talked about it with the smite for him compared to what Jwaow is running on his side here. So he's going to be a little bit more effective in a lane swap in that case. And you also don't want to risk falling behind because of that offensive summoner in the one-on-one lane.
Looks like he will end up joining Jankos over by the Gromp. Meanwhile, lane swap is completed on the top by ROCCAT, but of course, not so much going to be happening with Elements. And speaking of Elements, take a look at Dexter right now. This is a man, we talked about how much of an impact he's had to have in the early game, but that just illustrates it right there. 93% in the first 15 minutes. He's involved in almost every kill that Elements have.
Almost every single kill Elements have in the early game is started by Dexter. He's the guy who tries to carry the early game for them, but often he gets into situations where it's just too hard because he has like multiple losing lanes, so there's no wave pressure. They're forced to sit on the tower and farm, and then it just becomes very, very difficult to be a jungler. We saw Frederick in the last game, how if your lanes start getting pushed into the turrets, you fall behind in vision, you can't even go for any ganks because you have to respect if I can get counter ganks super easily. Vander will get the golems, is pretty big for him. Good little XP boost, and he walks down to spot, but he did manage to get the blue buff. Both teams here starting on the weak side with their junglers, being down on the opposite side of where your dual lane is with the two members, but both of them got away with it. So they're just gonna have a fairly standard start to the lane swap.
Yeah, this is nice too, especially for Vander. Not only was he able to grab a little bit of extra XP and gold there, but his item choice too, with the lane swap, with the free lane that they're currently having for ROCCAT, means he's not gonna have to worry about trying to harass for a little bit of extra gold. They're actually gonna send Jankos and Steve up here. Are they interested in doing a 4v0?
Well, we
just, like it might happen.
Yeah, we're just going, once again, fairly standard 4v0. Both lanes were pushing down. Nobody got a freeze going. And therefore, you have to send in your top and jungle just to secure or make sure that nobody can teleport in and get some farm. It does mean that Elements will have control around the dragon, obviously because they were on the bottom side of the map, and they're just playing out the poor Rift Scuttler here, and maybe going for an early gank. Nukeduck has been pushing the lane against this Vladimir, as we often see early on. And here we go.
Yeah, here we go indeed. This is going to be an easy summoner. Nukeduck will flash immediately. However, A lot of investment from Elements to try and take him down there has really meant the tower hasn't fallen. I feel like it's not going to be a problem here because ROCCAT are taking their time as well.
As long as they get it down, you know, 10, 20, 30 seconds after ROCCAT does, they're probably even going to get it close to the same time. It doesn't really matter too much. Now it's just about bouncing the wave back. You want, of course, the tower to kill all your minions here, so the next wave coming is going to push towards your tower, meaning once your top laner goes back up here, he gets a bit of extra farm. And there, both towers going down.
Nice and even.
Elements get a good bounce on that one. 2 minions were left from the side of ROCCAT. Not really going to do a whole lot.
So we talked a lot about how these two top laners, you know, you want to get them rolling in different ways. Jwaow with the damage to be able to utilize that Ignite TP HEcarim to its fullest, even as nerfed as it's been. And for Steve to get nice and tanky so he can pretty much be diving the backlines with impunity. But how does this 4v0 really affect that plan? Who does it slow down the most?
Well, slowing down, I mean, for ROCCAT, it was not about, you know, slowing down. Well, I guess it was honestly about, you're right about that one. It slows down Elements, obviously. The fact they're running the offensive summoner.
Maybe he'll turn the heat back on.
Train a little bit, but yeah, no. It was basically to try and slow down Jwaow on this HEcarim here. Don't put your Smite Fist into the one-on-one lane instantly. Don't risk losing that 2v2. But because Elements now have been able to take the bot lane tower, they don't care about Dragon clearly early on. Instead, they've swapped Tabzz to the top side and gonna fast push in, because that's one of the problems for Fizz. He doesn't really have any proper wave clear. So as long as it's not the Corki or the Lulu, then Elements can keep using Sivir to fast push in the towers. But that's why they try and move Tabzz around and follow Steve. He's gonna lose a few minutes on the tower, but he's gonna try and catch as many as possible after Tabzz just pushed it in.
Yep. Both the top laners will try to fight for some scraps. Jwow's going to get a few fed to him, however. He's got the help of PromisQ on the bottom. Vander, meanwhile, will go a roving, try and get some Dragon Vision out. He's pinged immediately, though. Froggen knows exactly what's going on there. We'll see if he actually does get pincered a little bit. PromisQ's coming up, back around the side of the Dragon, but a Magical Journey will mean Vander is nice and safe.
One of the nice things with Bard here, when you go in and you place a few deep wards, there are plenty of walls you can jump over and get out of the enemy jungle. Instead, though, we still have Jwaow down here on the bottom lane farming. We saw before the PromisQ was sitting there once the wave hit the tower. He's already hit level 4 though, and he's feeling pretty good from Jwow's side. It's getting more difficult then to go for straight dives and kill them. Instead, we saw how ROCCAT want to try and get in a position where they can poke him out and at least deny him the CS. He will still get the XP, long range of course, but if you deny him the farm, he needs to get to that Trinity Force point. He needs to get towards a tank item later to be super effective, and that's what ROCCAT is trying to deny him.
Yeah, and Steve on the meanwhile, he's got the CS lead over his lane opponent, even though the two haven't really met. Jankos is coming up to the top side to see if Steve does need a little bit of help. For now, seems to be fine on his own against this Tabzz and PromisQ lane, and their fast push isn't really going to be happening right now.
Well, if Jankos ever leaves the lane, the Sivir will be able to get in and hit the tower very, very easily. Tabzz can just keep pushing it in, but because Jankos is staying on the top side, it of course, as you just said, becomes a bit more difficult, unless you send up a third member. So you can see in the minimap, Dexter is on his way here, but it also means that now Jwaow is left on his own on the bottom side. So both teams sacrificing the top lanes a little bit here, allowing the dual lanes to start getting some hits on the tower, and they both play around them.
Jankos knows that PromisQ's around, but not sensing a threat, just goes and clears out his Krugs again. Steve's still holding strong here. We'll see if he continues to do it, because there really isn't that much pressure from Elements topside.
No, I really like this a lot more for ROCCAT, what they're doing here. With Jankos staying top, at least he's providing some security for Steve so he can stay on the tower and farm. You saw the bottom lane. Once it hit the tower, Jwaow just ran away. He was like, I'm not going to try and stay here. I don't know who's around. I don't want to risk getting binded by Vander and killed or something. So he backs away, meaning he lost a lot of farm. And then MrRallez and Vander got a lot of free damage on the tower, while Jankos, he's saying, I'm here with my top lane. I'm not going to let him die. I'm not going to let him lose more CS. And again, we talk about how ROCCAT, they want to slow down Elements in terms of the HEcarim pick here. They don't want him to get that Trinity Force early and be a bully. And it's working for them. They trade towers, but look at the CS difference between Steve and Jwaow.
Yeah, it's all good for ROCCAT right now. Meanwhile, Froggen himself is going to be trying to get a little extra CS by farming out in the jungle. Nukeduck will find him, and now it's a fight over the Raptor. It looks like that one's going to go to Nukeduck. Been very quiet in that mid lane since they've been focusing up and down rather than right in the middle, and that's really what I feel like is proving to ROCCAT's advantage right now. They're making Elements dance around.
Lulu Vlad is not exactly a kill lane.
No, not exactly. They tried to kill the Lulu.
Yeah, Froggen really wants to turn it into a passive farm lane in the start. He wants to level up in this Vlad, but then he hits a point where Nukeduck is going to struggle to trade with him because Froggen can then start out-sustaining him, especially once you start hitting towards that level 9 here, get rank 5 on your Q, and then you can also walk into the minion waves and just clear them with your E. So Froggen is happy trying to neutralize the lane, but both teams have been trading towers. Top wave didn't get bounced by elements, it got pushed into towers, so Steve is going to get even more CS now, while Jwaow has to try and make something happen elsewhere. It is slowly pushing back though for Steve, but he got level 6. There's a lot of gold in his back. Let's see what Jwaow can do once he comes back.
We'll have to see what Jwaow can do, but for the time being, Vander really roving around here. Let's take a look at what they're trying to get done. Another magical journey over the Dragon Wall. Speaking of Dragon, take a look at that difference between when these two teams get it. Clearly Elements have historically picked it up about this time. ROCCAT takes a lot more time to do it, but we know that they've had a lot longer games.
Yeah.
And I feel like right now, ROCCAT are in the better position to secure this one up.
ROCCAT also gotten a lot more dragons than Elements. If you look at the first 6 games, the Elements is only sitting on like 5 dragons total, one of the worst records of all the teams, because they simply just fall behind in the early game and they never get to really start any fights or get vision control around them. This one here is a bit more even in terms of that, but we see advantage for MrRallez, we see advantage for Steve in the top lane, and ROCCAT is now back to standard lanes, trying to secure some vision. We can already see pink wards in the river. Happens very often against a passive mid lane champion, because he's forced to obviously sit and try and last it on the tower, and then you take control of the river, which then gives you, of course, potential of a dragon, or roams between the 2 lanes, the bottom mid lane, very easily, where it becomes, once again, hard for Elements to respond. But Froggen finally got to push it out, and he gets the pink ward. 30
gold in his pocket, not too bad, but let's see if he's able to really do that much with it. You have Jankos hanging out in that rush. It's spotted, of course, but now this might open up the dragon possibility. No, they decide to back away as they see Dexter standing on the ward in the back. PromisQ helping out Froggen in the mid. But Jankos is the one who's roving around, and Jwaow could be in some trouble.
I really like this setup for ROCCAT in terms of having all these pink wards in the river and then have a Bard sitting down in the bottom lane. Because when you then time the charms on the way and you take them and even the Rift Scuttler, you get such a huge movement speed boost that you can move between the bot lane and mid lane super fast. And like join in case there's a fight going on and maybe try and set up a gank on Froggen. And that was what we saw Vander at least try beforehand. Now Elements has secured pretty decent vision. Jwaow, he's in trouble.
Yep, Smite's on the fish. It's going to be ulted over as Jwaow spends 1 for 1. Take a look. Still at that difference in CS, falling further behind. Steve Jankos helping to keep that gap widening. And speaking of widening gaps too, these AD carries, it seemed like it was pretty mirror for a while, but RALLZ is the one who stayed in lane, who's continued to push it. Well, Tabzz has kind of been running around, and as a result, he's fallen a little bit behind in farm.
Yeah, Tabzz was also left a little bit on his own in the start when he swapped to the top lane. Had to be a little bit careful, not going for any too aggressive plays before he had some backup from PromisQ. Cost him a little bit, and also at the same time, ROCCAT has just been in control when it comes to how do we want to play this swap here and what is our goal early on. This is what we can say Giants failed to do in the last game, where they said, okay, there's this top lane, we need to be very careful. He's going to rush a Trinity Force, he has the Ignite here. Don't give him a chance to get a one-on-one lane. So they swapped it around. They made sure they could deny farm and get farm on Steve instead.
Exactly.
And that's really paid off. So the smite so far, because he's now got the Skirmisher Saber, he's going to get the Cinderhulk soon, and then he starts scaling into late game. And he can become a bit of a backline threat. He's going to have decent damage, but he's also going to be very tanky, so he's going to be super annoying to deal with for Elements.
Right, and this has also allowed Jankos to go a little bit more of a damaging path too. He picks up the Warrior enchantment on his Stalker's Blade, and yeah, okay, maybe you don't want to put all your eggs on a Fizz as far as tanks are concerned, but they've also got the Lulu, that's that artificial tankiness of the wild growth. It's, I feel overall, a very safe team when utilized properly. The Bard, RALLZ on this Corki. It's so hard for anyone on Elements to really take out anyone individually.
Sure, and it's going to now be about this mid-game spike coming up in a few minutes for ROCCAT. We always talk about with Corki. It almost gets boring mentioning it time and time again, but that's really where the champion shines. And they're slowly towards it. They have the first item completed for Nukeduck, so we can soon start seeing ROCCAT decide to group up. And you have this Vladimir sitting in the mid lane, which was one of the last few picks for Elements. We often talk about when you play against mid-game comps that want to siege and poke, you need proper wave clear. Vladimir doesn't really offer that because he has to stand in the middle of the wave. So that's why it becomes a very risky pick. It's fine in the one-on-one against the Lulu because, again, you will get to the point where you can just out-trade her, and you will out-sustain her as well, and she can really go toe-to-toe with you, but you can always push the lane, and that's what ROCCAT needs. So once they start sending in MrRallez to that mid lane, there's not a whole lot Froggen can do, and that's why Elements need to react as well, and have Tabzz be ready. So you suddenly start moving around the map, you move the pieces, you say, oh, you send your AD mid, okay, we need our wave there, there's Tabzz in there, then we can move Froggen to the side lane. And if Elements fail to do that, the mid tower is going to die.
But that's the problem, right? We've seen Elements. This is another game now where they have a sole source of real wave clear. This time it's on their AD carry instead of their mid lane. And that, it just seems so easy to exploit considering how well ROCCAT have been able to run Elements around the map to their advantage in the top lane and also in the AD carry position. So at this point, as Elements, how do you respond to that? You just, what do you do with Tabzz? Do you just try to keep him close to mid so you can send him wherever you want? I mean, what do they do? What do they need to do to stay relevant?
I mean, I think here for Elements, there's not a whole lot they can do right now. I mean, they're still waiting also to scale a bit with the Vladimir in the mid lane. What you want to do most likely is you want to have that Trinity Force completed for Jwaow. You want to get home guards, and then you still want to try and rely on having a fantastic engage where you have an Alistar sped up by a Sivir, and you have that flank coming from the HEcarim. That's how you are going to stop the siege, because whenever then ROCCAT groups up, you should have a ward behind them, or at least on the side. That gives you a chance to engage him from Jwaw's side, but that still requires a bit of time, and that's why ROCCAT's early start was so smart in saying we're going to delay this HEcarim from getting these items. He's not going to get an early home guards. He's not going to get an early Trinity Force. So we can group 15, 16 minutes in, and we don't have to worry about that engage coming from Elements. Because that's what it's going to be about. Can Elements start the fight, or will ROCCAT just sit there, slowly poke Elements away, and just say, okay, Tabzz is not here, that's a tower for us, and then rotate around, get objectives, and so on.
And yeah, we talked a lot about in the beginning how this looked, reminiscent of Gambit's composition. I feel like it's also a lot safer than that. So altogether, this puts so much pressure on Elements to try and force something that is also less likely to work out, that they're in a precarious situation now. Neither team has really attempted the Dragon just yet, not seriously. I feel like it's probably going to be a while, because ROCCAT are still happily farming themselves up and getting themselves ahead as far as the CS and item count goes.
I don't even think ROCCAT needs to worry about a Dragon, honestly. It's more for them about getting to siege on towers. They don't have to take an open fight, where Elements still has a good chance, where they can use that mobility from the Sivir to dance around, use your Alistar really effectively. The Dragons are going to be more for Elements to try and force big team fights. They can play around it. But for now, we just saw Tabzz move to the mid lane, instantly just clear one wave, respecting the fact that MrRallez would most likely show up, and he did show up. But instead of, because the rest of Elements have gone to the top side of the map, Froggen just killed the Rift Scuttler, while Dexter is taking care of the red buff. Elements just completely give over a free Dragon to ROCCAT.
Yeah, not in the right place at the right time. ROCCAT will take advantage of it. So, #1 is secured 14 minutes into the game. The gold is still very close. There's about 1,000 in the lead for ROCCAT. 2 towers to 2. Tabzz is forced to flash away from the Tempered Fate. It's going to be a summoner for an ult. Not a bad trade if you're ROCCAT. And right now, they're stacking pretty deep on the bot side. We'll be able to clear the wave away when they want. But it does leave the middle exposed for Elements to get a little bit of revenge.
Both teams making a few small misplays on the map. The Elements giving up a completely free Dragon to ROCCAT. Didn't have to do anything for it. Just lost the red buff, which you don't really care too much about at this point. And at the same time, then ROCCAT, I guess, super small mistake. Gave Elements a chance to get a few hits on the mid tower, but that was about it. Nothing really came from it. So they can be still fairly happy. You have your Corki now. Trinity Force is completed. You wait for the boots to be upgraded. Then you just send him mid lane. Once you push out the bottom lane, because you need someone from Elements to be forced to go back down to the tier 2 tower in the bottom lane and defend it. So you open up this mid lane here.
And we'll have to see. They're able to bait Elements in a bad situation. ROCCAT on the bottom side, eyeballing the 2nd tier bottom tower. Elements are caught in a moment of weakness as they spend a couple of backs just to try and get away. Or just to rather get back and try to defend this one. Tabzz is moving in position, but no one else is there just yet. They're not going to be able to get some serious hits on this tower, while Nukeduck does the same thing in the mid with only Dexter to defend.
Yeah, get a few hits on the tower here, and as soon as the wave clear arrives, you can even rotate to the mid lane now. You have the jungle fully warded up, so you know there's no chance of you getting caught out. You can spot Elements on the way, and then suddenly ROCCAT now can play around 2 lanes at once and a jungle that they even control because of all these wards you see placed early on for them. So they have very nice setup here. They use the Corki really well, and also Nukeduck getting that last rod here. So he's very, very strong 15 minutes in. And if Froggen is left on his own, we talked about it, then the wave is going to get pushed down and ROCCAT can get at least a few hits on the tower every single time to slowly chip them away. Keep control of that bot side jungle as well. These towers will eventually go down if Elements makes a mistake.
Well, Elements has made several mistakes just split so far, Deficio. We'll see if ROCCAT can find more openings to punish them. For the meanwhile, let's take stock of where we're at right now. ROCCAT, they have a lead. They've extended a little further now. 2 towers to 2, still the count. 1 dragon to 0. Gold lead, not that significant. However, they are making Elements really dance to their tune. Steve defends this ward, this pink ward they placed down. PromisQ calls some backup from Dexter. The stun comes in. They don't want to take a fight, though. We'll see what happens as everyone's just dancing around and trying to make sure that they have the numbers advantage themselves.
Yeah, so Elements just get the pink ward at least. Small victory for them. Let's look at the rest of the map. I mean, ROCCAT is just back to doing exactly the same. MrRallez is pushing down the bottom lane. He wants Tabzz to go down and clear the wave, and then he just want to swap with him and go into the mid lane. Tabzz might be setting up a little bit of a gank. Potential fast push on this mid tower. 4 members from Elements around it. Jwaow sitting in base. He got the home guards. Didn't complete the Trinity Force first, but nobody from ROCCAT is overextending.
Elements aren't really being given an opening here, but you know, with regards to the way that they've opened their split, really disappointing over the top of things. I feel like Elements are playing a little bit better here than we've seen in the last couple of weeks. Is that a fair statement, you think?
I mean, it's been a fairly passive early game, which has been more about denying the enemy top laner, slowing down the enemy top laner. So Elements not really been put that far under pressure, but they're still 2,000 gold behind. I mean, 7 out of 7 games, they've been behind at 10 minutes in gold. So they're still not getting even just a small advantage in the early game. They fall behind time and time again. We need to see what they can do now with Sivir. They get time though from ROCCAT. ROCCAT is not playing super aggressive on the towers. So there is time for Froggen and so on to slowly scale up here.
Well, and for Jwaow too. He's been held pretty far back just because he wasn't really able to do much in the wake of the lane swap. But now that he's had some chance to free farm it up, he's getting closer and closer to his Trinity Force. But he's still not there. He's still sitting on those 2 items. So I feel like it's still going to be a while before he can really get a whole lot done. Yes, he's got the home guards, but as you mentioned, in 5.11, it's not quite as deadly as it was.
It's not the same punch. It's not the same one.
Yeah,
it's still strong. Out of it. Still strong for him. Still going to be a big part of just how Jwaow can engage from the flank for himself. But once again, we are back to the same as before. ROCCAT looking for an opening, looking for Elements to miss position and give up a free mid tower. And at the same time, you can wait potentially for next Dragon spawn. You got the first one gifted to you for free. You didn't have to do anything. Your Fizz is slowly scaling in to be a big tank. Just give, again, as we said, a bit more time for Elements. Scale up, which is what they need. We haven't seen many games where Elements managed to get to late game. Jankos gets a ward and jumps out.
He likes to live dangerously. So let's see what'll happen. We're getting close to the 20-minute mark. Baron will hit the field. The Dragon is not more than a minute away. So for ROCCAT here, it feels like they're doing a great job of just keeping Elements away from any point of interest on this map. But they're not, as you mentioned, not extending that goldie that much. Take a look at the time it takes them usually to secure those Barons. It's still some time away before they usually attempt it.
Yeah, nobody wants to rush it in at 20 minutes. Nobody really looking to do that in this game here. Instead, we are pushing out the lanes. ROCCAT.
The ward kills, man. Those are exciting ward kills.
Comes here for something here. Elements, though, I mean, this mid tower is fairly low. ROCCAT doing a good job keeping someone to defend.
And they've got wave clear. I mean,
we're really just waiting right now for the next Dragon to spawn. Elements this time around shouldn't have to give it up for free. You got 2 items complete on your Vladimir. You got a vintage on your AD carry. You have to be ready to take a fight for this one. You cannot let ROCCAT slowly but surely get them.
Yeah. Both teleports available for our top laners right now. Jwaw's actually left the base. PromisQ's going back, but the Dragon is procced. This is a mistiming from Elements. It's going to be another free Dragon for ROCCAT. Maybe now Elements can get something done in the mid tower.
So Elements rather try and trade for mid tower. Nice ulti coming in from Vander. At least trying to buy some time. It will go down though. But Elements saying we don't want to try and risk a Dragon fight. Instead, we want to trade for something else. We want gold over the Dragon stacks. And this is something that is okay to do, honestly, from time to time. I mean, the first few stacks from the Dragon, we always talk about it's a super slow snowball coming in. Like, you need the 5 stacks for it to really be super, super important. Obviously, the first one is great, but the goal here is what Elements is saying. We want more gold. We need items to scale up for the Vladimir, for the HEcarim. Let's see a fight, though.
Yeah, Vander might not be able to get involved in it, but Steve surely can as he jumps onto Tabzz and turns his attention over to PromisQ. Ignite's sticking on him as a teleport comes up. Headbutt. In comes Jwaow. Holds the fears on Steve, and that is going to be a 21-minute first blood. And it goes into Elements' pocket.
And Elements had everyone around that side of the map here. Remember, they just took a mid tower and moved slowly towards the top side. And that was a ROCCAT deciding to fight. RALLEZ was on the bottom lane pushing in. Let's see what happens mid now.
Yeah, Froggen's in 2v1. I don't know if that pool is going to be able to get him out of harm's way. Wild Growth knocks him up, but he flashes, and now PromisQ has drawn the attention of Jankos and Nukeduck. He's going to be fine for now, but the rest of Elements are going to be coming around from the ROCCAT side. They've got the stun up, and Jankos is knocked back into the team. Froggen on the very edge, trying to stay safe as Jwaow plows in and takes him out. This game just started to heat up, but it took a while, Deficio.
RALLEZ.
Goodbye, PromisQ.
Wanted 1 kill at least, but ROCCAT here, a few times now being caught out, and they were the ones looking for the fights, not respecting how many members Elements had around the map here. Remember, RALLEZ was on the bot side before. We didn't just get to see the small tap coming down. Longest first blood in the EU LCS has been a very slow-paced early game. Nobody's really tried anything until that fight we just saw.
Yeah, it seemed like both teams were just sitting there, sort of like in an old Western, when they're getting ready to pull the guns out. Instead of that, they're just sitting there polishing them, and all of a sudden they remembered, oh wait, now it's about time to go. There we go. So as it stands,
then ROCCAT shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, at least once. Hopefully that for them that doesn't happen again. But Elements have even the gold up, close to at least. They're still down by about 900. They were down by about 1,500. So,
but key members getting kills.
Yes.
Key members getting kills. Vladimir in the mid lane. Yes, we know how strong he is late game, and the HEcarim, who was falling behind. The entire lane swap from ROCCAT was about slowing down the HEcarim. It worked for them at first, but now with these poor engages, they've now given over some much needed gold to Elements.
Hey man, Jwow's got 100% kill participation right now. And he's got his Trinity Force too. So, yes, it doesn't pack the same punch that teleport home guards HEcarim as it used to. Elements are still able to use it. They're still getting a little bit of pressure now. Tower was down in mid, of course. They've cracked the outer ring a while ago, trading it for that dragon. But ROCCAT, you know, with their 2 dragons, what can they really get done here that Elements can't? It doesn't seem much right now.
No, again, the 2 dragons doesn't mean a whole lot for ROCCAT. So, honestly, looking back at it, Elements saying we'd rather trade tower or 1 tower for 1 dragon was not the worst trade, as long as they can go back and now fight for the next few dragons coming, so you don't get in that situation where there's this ticking time bomb coming in where you have to suddenly worry about a potential 5th dragon. We might see another fight though, Pyro.
Yeah, we might. Looks like it's already in progress. Froggen is the target, but they don't have enough to polish him off.
Look at Steve though.
Steve is going around the side. Tempered Fate's gonna stop Tabzz in his tracks. Earth comes up, doesn't connect as the timing was a bit off, and Jwaow running in the back, can't get anything done. At the end of the day, both teams had to back off. Nothing killed but wards here.
You see a bit of a plan there for ROCCAT's combo. If Steve coming in from the flank, and then you land the ulti from Vander to really buy him time to get to that back line. Mistimed it though, so it was ulti from Fizz and the Bard together. End up doing, well, they got a flash from Tabzz, so they got something. But ROCCAT trying to force a fight. What they really want with this composition though is to sit down and push down these towers.
Exactly.
For themselves. You got the Corki, you got the Lulu, disengage from a Bard, like even trying to defend a tower versus Bard when you can land a Q connected between you and the tower itself is super, super hard to sit and wave clear from. So ROCCAT has not been aggressive enough at doing that, seeing as this mid tower with a Vladimir is still alive.
Yeah, and it's really big credit to Tabzz for being in the right place at the right time there too. I feel like Elements is really now starting to utilize him a lot better. Yes, he's the sole source of wave clear. I guess it's maybe a bit of a overstatement because they have a little bit. It's not a ton with Vladimir, not a ton with Gragas, but they can get it done. And the problem is ROCCAT, they're not securing these kills. They're not pushing Elements really far enough away from these towers to be able to do anything. So as it stands, Elements still has that tower in the middle. And everyone on their team is actually starting to hit a comfortable point. This is what Elements have wanted to do all split long, is scale into a comfortable position.
This is the kind of games Elements have wanted to play every single time. But what has always happened was they would fall behind early, they would give up first bloods, they would get ganked in the lanes, or just honestly be out-pushed in the lanes. and they would fall so far behind in gold that at 20-25 minutes, there were barely anything they could do, and they would just end up losing like 30 minutes. This game here, because ROCCAT has been so passive, honestly, and because ROCCAT now took these engages where they were 4v5, 3v4, it has bought time for Elements, and it's exactly what they want.
Yeah, and you know, harkening back to the very beginning, we talked about Elements giving up First Bloods and how that seemed to kind of be the curse for them. Well, they secured it this time. Maybe if things hold, they'll keep on pushing this game in. So, more wards being cleared away. The Vision game continues, this time Elements on the front.
And now we see the push.
9 seconds, but now ROCCAT, yeah, they're able to respond to this. Nobody in position from Elements to defend. Tower finally goes down. The gold leads back a little further in their favor. Dragon spawn now. Let's see if we have another fight here, Deficio.
Really what ROCCAT wanted to do 5-6 minutes ago. Tabzz was on the bottom side, and they could instantly just 5-man go and take the tower. Straight onto the Dragon. These are going to be important for ROCCAT. They want to go towards the number 5 here. Elements, they're going in for the fight.
They are going in for the fight. Vander realizes too late that it's going to be a huge amount of trouble. Tempered Fate gets thrown down right in the middle to only stall things out. Froggen knocks over MrRallez, and Nukeduck is going to fall. Jankos picks up Tabzz in the meanwhile, but it is going to be a 2-for-1 as ROCCAT are scattered to the winds, and Elements will claim the spoils of the Dragon.
And Vander ended up trapping his own backline right there. Elements could easily collapse onto them. The damage from Froggen and his ulti even came in after the ulti faded away from Vander. ROCCAT losing the fight, grouping up 5 members, not respecting the fact that Jwaow can teleport in behind them. He gets a fantastic flank. Great team fight from Elements. They stopped the potential 5 dragons now, so them trading tower early on for dragons is now very worth it. Let's see it again here. Look at how Elements engaging with the Alistar first. 3-man knock up, then Vander. His own backline. He's trying to basically save them here, but in the end, it just buys a lot of time for Elements to position around them, and the damage from the Vladimir comes down anyway with the ulti after. And they can just clean up the fight.
The cruelest fate is a tempered one, Deficio.
2 kills from for Froggen in the mid lane. 3 items completed.
And not to mention, Jwaw's had a big hand in this as well. Again, we've talked a little bit about the HEcarim nurse, but clearly that's not having a problem. Jwaow right now, well, I was going to say he's having a great game, but he got the blue buff taken away. Jankos, however, will pay for it dearly and sends that one right over to Froggen.
Watching PromisQ on Alistar compared to the other supports we've seen him play, it's a completely different player. He really seems so comfortable in starting fights. He a beautiful setup here to, a beautiful headbutt, honestly, to deny the tunnel from Jankos. And Baron being started straight away from Elements. Look at the bot lane. Steve is sitting there, has teleport ready, but there's no jungler. There's a pink ward around it from Elements. ROCCAT is going to have to face check in towards this one.
This is confidence, but this is also controlled. Now they throw down Tempered Fate. Vander is able to stop that Baron thanks to his key use of ultimate, but Elements have maybe baited ROCCAT into a trap. Wild Growth, will it be enough? No, as Froggen takes his 5th kill of the game. Dexter throws the big barrel, slows down Vander for just a second, but still ROCCAT lose a member just trying to stop the Baron attempt, and now Elements are on the 2nd tier in the mid lane.
And nice play again from Elements. After they create a pick, they start the Baron saying, we're just going to disengage if ROCCAT moves in and try and get a kill instead. We have so much mobility with, funny enough, the first pick Sivir, and of course your HEcarim to just get onto ROCCAT, secure another kill, mid-tower down. You finally really get to see Elements, like in week 1 against Gambit, where they get past the early to mid game. They're now heading goal, 30 minutes in, 5-0 Froggen in the mid lane.
This is exactly the kind of game that Elements want to play. They need this win. They haven't won a game since that Gambit victory, all the way back in week 1. ROCCAT, though, scratching their heads a little bit about what the hell is going on. They haven't been able to stop these Elements. Still holding on, no gold lead around anymore, actually, and maybe stop the Baron attempt, maybe keep stalling the game out, but that's exactly what Elements want.
Just enjoying the music a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the joys of living in Germany here.
Something we get to experience on a regular basis, that is for sure. So.
Do you? I don't hear that kind of music very often.
I hear it on the train, actually. All the time. Some guy gets on with an accordion. Anyways, back to the game, though. We've got, right now, wave pushing in favor of ROCCAT on the top side, but Tabzz is there to stop it. He seems to just be everywhere he needs to be. Yes, he's been behind the Corki in farm all game, but it's Sivir. You don't need to be a carry. All you need to do is press R while your team's grouped.
Again, it's what I do in our Riot Rumble tournament, and it's working. for our team at least. It's working for Elements in this one here. Tabzz.
Yeah, I mean, if Deficio can do it, you guys can too.
I mean, that's how it works, right? I will say though, for Sivir, she does have the ability to have fantastic damage output as well. If you get one of these fights where you get your AoE damage on like multiple members, she can do really well, but she's not exactly a hyper carry in the late game. But we're gonna see Elements once again back towards this Baron. There's a lot of wave play on the side of ROCCAT, making it very difficult for Elements to just start up and siege a tower. Instead, secure vision in the jungle. You want to bait ROCCAT now into a fight here. No home guard possible for Jwaow, no teleport ready.
What I want to know though is as big as Froggen is getting, and you know, with this tanky Gragas, with this HEcarim, will they be able to, I mean, I guess baiting the fight is the way to do it. I wanted to talk about diving, but forget that because Baron's been started by Elements here. The damage is not that high because, well, also Froggen's not here, but all of ROCCAT here, this is very risky for Elements. Can ROCCAT stop this?
All they're going to go around
to start a fight. They do, and Jump the Water is going to slow down Jwaow. Steve jumps on in, however, he's surrounded by Elements. See if he can get away. In comes the HEcarim ult. Steve's down, it's Dexter who takes him, and the barrel is rolled out, flashes away from MrRallez and Vander as Jankos now Hemo Plague taking on him. Froggen ignited. Nukeduck, though, is getting chased down by everyone. Again, ROCCAT still lose one member. And it seemed like Steve was not on the same page as the rest of his team.
Well, the thing is, Steve never really has a chance here because ROCCAT's composition is built around you group, you poke down, and then you have a teleport flank coming in from Steve. But he can't do that without teleport, and he can't do it if Elements are the one who's controlling the pace of the game. They're the ones who start the Baron and say, come at us, just run straight at us right now. We're gonna disengage the Baron, we're gonna pop Sivir ulti, and we're gonna dive straight at you. You saw them, they even left the ward alive in the Baron pit. And this is not even about us getting Baron, it's about us getting a chance to get you out of your own base, away from your own towers, out in the open, and then we can take a fight.
So far, they've been able to accomplish just that. So we're approaching 33 minutes in the game, but we'll talk about that in a minute because this is how Elements managed to get another kill.
Well, again, look at it here. So as soon as ROCCAT moves into the river, Tabzz pops his ulti, Steve dives in on his own here, but nobody's gonna follow him really on the side. Keep in mind, Jankos went for the warrior enchant, so he's not that strong. He cannot really tank the damage. He has decent damage himself, but he cannot sit in there and help Steve out, and you never get a flank, you never get to land enough poke on the side of ROCCAT, and you can't really sit and kite back with the Lulu, Bard, and Corki because you're forced to engage near that Baron here. So Elements are just using that tool to their advantage instead of trying to siege against a lot of wave players.
Doing the same thing with the Dragon too, and either they bait ROCCAT into another fight or they get this one for free. This should be a lot easier. Jwow's backing away. He's got teleport, but he's on a ward. Jankos can stop him. There's the smite. They will, however, give up the Dragon for it. ROCCAT don't manage to get anything for trying to sniff it out. Jwaow polymorphed. In comes PromisQ. They're running wild. Jankos forced to flash away. The barrel knocks everyone back as Jump the Waters barely takes a scratch out of PromisQ rather. And Steve running away. Tempered Fate to stop Dexter, but the rest of Elements are still able to chase on. Hemo Plague ticking. Steve, he's down. Froggen with another kill. And Elements right back to it. Will they take a Baron from here, Deficio?
Well, they can certainly go down and start and try and force another fight, but then again, play it safe, honestly, because you have been able to bait around these fights or these objectives from time and time again. You don't have to go and instantly rush it. Go back, use a lot of gold. You've been fighting. I mean, you won another fight here. You got a second Dragon as well. But once again, we're out in the open. ROCCAT is forced to come down and try and stop an objective being started. That's where the Sivir ulti comes in. That's where Elements come shine. Even some miscommunication at the start. Dexter went into the body slam, didn't really want to ulti at first, then realized, okay, I could have knocked back Jankos and killed him, and then did a bit too late. But in the end, they can still chase up, and poor Steve, he tries to stay alive, but he goes down.
That Hemo Plague is very,
well, he's
very
6-0
right now. Yeah, that is a big Vladimir. Okay, so in all of it, Elements still controlling pretty much everywhere through the river on the map. ROCCAT falling into the trap, getting baited time and time again. Now let's see what Elements can do, what ROCCAT can do to try and stay alive.
And in the last game where we saw Gambit play somewhat the same comp as ROCCAT are doing now, we never got to experience what happens when you start falling behind. When you don't use that mid-game spike you get to siege down these towers, well, then you get the problem where the enemy team can always find ways to engage on you by either forcing objectives or just being straight up able to dive you, because they have champions like a HEcarim, They have that Sivir coming in. The Vladimir as well is going to be nearly unkillable at this time. So ROCCAT simply missed their very important spike and are now being punished, and have been punished for the last 10 minutes, basically, by Elements.
And you know, the last time this happened to them where they missed spikes, they got baited, they got caught out, and they got dealt with in time is really last week, the day one, their opener, of course, against Giants. So that game lasted, a little shy of 40 minutes. We're getting close to that mark. And we're in danger, at least ROCCAT is, of seeing that happen to them again. If this Baron does get secured, no one from ROCCAT are going to stop it.
No, everything is warded up from Element, so you have to face check so many different pushes getting into the Baron. Also, 2 guys are showing themselves mid lane. ROCCAT has absolutely no clue. Well, they might know this Baron is going on, but they can't see it go down at least. And now they notice.
Jankos! They're just too many Elements right up in them. Tabzz is going to take that kill. Red buff on top of it, and Elements continue the slaughter right now. Extending that gold lead. Steve's on the bottom trying to split push. The Cinderhulk Fizz won't do nearly as much, though. He can just go ahead and try to poke down the tower, but there's a tier 2 being fired down by Elements in turn in the middle.
Jwaow going back to defend it.
Or rather, topside, excuse me.
Trades the bottom tower for the Baron. Look at this massive wave on the way on the top side. Elements will easily be able to catch that one, buff it up, and that's where the AP wave clear becomes fairly difficult once these Baron buff minions come in there. It's a lot harder suddenly to play them. Lulu Corki won't be able to do a whole lot, so Elements can just ride this massive wave here. And look at the base as well. Jwaow sitting ready with his home guards. He's just waiting to teleport in.
Steve's backing off, so he's going to be coming to the defense here. Froggen stepping up forward, but look at the damage that Elements have there. Tempered Fate used just to slow down the tower. Teleport coming in now for Jwaow. ROCCAT know they have to back away. Dexter going to force it. Nukeduck evaporated. In comes Jwaow, but he's got nothing to do but look for Steve. Playful Trickster on him, but he's just going to get knocked up and locked up. Inhibitors down. So is Steve. Jwaow running all the way to Fountain. And the rest of ROCCAT are trying to save the game, but it looks like it might already be over. 38 minutes, and Elements will seal ROCCAT's fate with a victory here, their first since week 1. And a well-earned win indeed.
As soon as we got past the mid-game here, Elements just took over. ROCCAT engaged into some poor team fights in the mid-game, got punished for it. Froggen got so many kills, and Elements got to play the map. They got to play out in the open with HEcarim, with the Sivir pick, the first pick coming in for them. And it just worked so well in always diving on to ROCCAT in these big team fights here. They never really got to use their composition at all, no. ROCCAT's side. They had a fine start. They were slowing down Jwaow. They had the possibility to start grouping on the mid lane, use your Corki or Lulu to poke away, but it was just way too slow from them. And then they started taking these fights, they lose them, and suddenly Elements get enough time to scale up, get the map open, and they use it.
And for these Elements, happy faces all around as they manage to secure themselves a win. On the side of ROCCAT, the questions you got to ask, as Yamato, you can see him talking to the team there, and yeah, I think that's the way to describe it. They never were able to get rolling past the early game. They had a great early game. Their 4v0 was fantastic, and they got little edges here and there. They got themselves ahead in key lanes, but they just slowed down, and that is something that a team like Elements wants you to do.
It is for sure. It's what they're playing for almost every single game. This time around, had a little bit more wave clear. Still, the Vladimir in mid lane could have been punished, but Froggen got to sit and farm too late. Massive part, of course, in the big team fights of them winning. I think they're all looking at the damage dealt to champions. Froggen right now, if you take his entire team's damage dealt to champions and you combine it, he doesn't even get close to what Froggen did. He's like so far ahead of everyone else.
Yeah, but they were using everyone else for utility, right? Like Froggen is like,
it's an AoE mage.
He's a single threat, but he's a huge threat. So that's like, that's what they want to do. On the other hand, they had Jwaow charging in, and he had a fantastic game too. His kill participation was really, really high. Yes, he only got 2 of those kills. But the HEcarim was a little bit nerfed. He still was able to make some huge plays.
Did his job in the
PromisQ on Alistar. Yeah. Clearly a comfortable champion for him.
And this pick, remember, if we again go back to the pick and ban phase, first rotation for ROCCAT on purple side, they went for the Rek'Sai, and they took away, I believe it was the Fizz for the top lane. They didn't take Alistar. We can see it once. We can see it again here. Yeah. So basically, look at ROCCAT's side. First rotation for them. Steve and Jankos gets the jungle and top lane pick, so they left Alistar to go second rotation, and that means suddenly Elements never really got punished for first picking an AD carry. PromisQ gets on by far his best champion, and we saw how strong he was in starting fights on this Alistar.
Yeah, and also, first picking the Sivir, you talked about it in Champ Select.
Love it.
It was absolutely necessary. They needed the wave clear. We talked about it going in, that they needed a little bit more. Tabzz was able to go all over the map. No, he was not, a massive standout, but again, Sivir, you just need to be with your team. You need to be able to hit R at the right time and you need to be able to clear waves. Tabzz did that magnificently, so it seems like everyone in Elements, this game at least, was able to do the job that they had in mind.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, it's why when we have Sivir, we always talk about, the tempo she brings, how you can fast push out these waves here so you can force someone to go defend. You can start the team fights with your ulti here. And of course, you can also defend your own towers, which is what Tabzz managed to do here. But also thanks to ROCCAT simply not really committing, honestly, in the mid-game, saying, now we do this, now we focus this one tower here. And maybe a lack of communication a little bit coming in when had to start the fights. I mean, Steve is still fairly new on this team. He was the guy who went in a few times where the rest of the team couldn't really follow. Vander's ultis with the ulti from Steve as well sometimes, collapsed together. So it was a bit of a tricky game for ROCCAT, and it seemed like they weren't on the same page, at least, in terms of team fights.
It does seem really strange. It's a complete 180 from their game versus Origin last week, where they were just clicking on the same page all the time. So definitely some kinks to work out for ROCCAT as they go forward in the split. I still think that they're a team that their record doesn't necessarily indicate how good or how strong they really are, but you have to put up a more convincing performance than that. But on Elements...
That's the weird thing about ROCCAT. I mean, suddenly they show up, beat Origin, look fantastic. We're like, oh, this team here, they have great players on paper. Everyone talks about how well they perform in scrims.
For the last year, pretty much.
For the last year. And we see like, okay, great game. Start talking about what can they do. And then they go in, and suddenly it seems like nothing really improved for them. And it's so hard to rate where ROCCAT really sits in the standings.
There's one thing that I think definitely did improve, though. If you look at, we kind of got lost in everything that was happening all game. MrRallez stood out not on his team, but generally just doing exactly what he needed to do. So that worked out well for them in his first game, even if it wasn't quite a win. But enough about that. We're going to go ahead and send it over to the analyst desk. They're going to take a look.